Hey, my name's Nicholas Mudskipper. I'm a tattooer in Cape Town. I own a shop called Toon Tattoo. And I grew up in Cape Town and found my way out to Southeast Asia, to Thailand. I lived in Bangkok for 8 years and had a tattoo shop out there for 6 years. The collecting thing started really early with me. I was always obsessed with monsters and sort of old school skate, surf graphics. I started looking at like old tattoo sort of stickers, the kind of cheap ones you'd get from bubblegum stands that had all the cool little monsters on. So I got into like collecting He-Man, Ninja Turtles, Thundercats. Obviously we had Power Rangers that came out in South Africa. It was originally from Japan. They had a lot of the weird sort of kaiju monsters. So I didn't know one day I'd move out to Asia, but I found drips and drabs around just vintage markets. I'd always find kind of Power Ranger monsters. And when I did move out to Thailand in 2008, I was already collecting vintage toys, especially more the American or the European lines. But I started seeing a lot of vintage Japanese toys, and they were these insane Ultraman monsters, all the bad guys, all sort of overlords of those kind of worlds. So yeah, I had a tattoo shop there, and the aesthetic of all the weird creatures I thought looked super cool. So it was the perfect spot to start collecting this sort of line of toys. Obviously being in South Africa, you don't have access to all these amazing Japanese toys. Finding myself in Asia and also plugging into the toy collecting scene kind of opened up a lot of doors for me for having access to all these monsters. So besides the monsters being a massive inspiration to the sort of tattooing and the art that I do, if you look at a lot of my tattoos, I take a lot of the structure and the color waves from these vintage toys. And yeah, I think collecting toys and sort of just even the artwork behind it, it's a massive influence on all the flash that I draw, all the referencing. So yeah, it's kind of from the figure to the actual tattoo, and I just love the whole scene that it brings. So basically I opened up Toon Tattoo in 2016. So I'd been living abroad for a long time. People know me as a collector, and my shop's always been a good showcase of things that I'm into. When I first opened up the shop, I had kind of my whole collection laid out throughout the whole shop, and it was kind of an overload of toys, which I thought was fucking cool. But obviously the rest of the dudes in the shop, they also wanted to look like a tattoo shop. So I had to really nitpick, and one of my favorite kind of collections of toys in the shop are the kaiju, the Ultraman monsters. So when you walk in the door, you're actually forced to look at my collection of toys that's in the front glass counter. So yeah, Toon is a reflection of all the things that influence me. Obviously, a lot of stuff comes from Asia, which is a massive influence on my tattoos. My wife's from Asia. I spent a lot of my time in Asia, and I think it gave me the confidence, the skill, and the intrigue into that kind of world that makes Toon what it is. Ultraman came to me via, obviously, the interest in monsters. You know, when I always looked at like clean-cut robots, sort of space age, very sleek, it wasn't my cup of tea to begin with, but every villain needs a nemesis or a hero that sort of just takes them out. And looking at old comic books, looking at old Japanese signage, Ultraman's kind of everywhere. He's used in like tire adverts, he's used in coffee shops. He's the hero of the people. And sometimes he doesn't look as crazy interesting as all the monsters to me, but he's a massive part of that world. So he's been in the forefront of the toy collecting, and I actually avoided collecting him for years, but he's a super part. It's like collecting He-Man and not collecting Skeletor. You know, he's the dude. I've always had a kind of a thing for sneakers. I used to be into sneaker collecting, and that started off with obviously being into skating. Also, the age I was when I was growing up in Cape Town, the specific sneakers or the sort of rare collabs weren't that obtainable. You know, obviously growing up, earning more money, being into more of a scene, I started noticing and educating myself on certain collabs and seeing more things. And one of the biggest ones that stood out to me was the Air Force One that Mr. Cartoon did, obviously being a tattooer, and that LA street culture, which I really enjoy. Seeing a shoe come together with an artist for me was massive. You know, that really put that on the radar. Moving to Asia, the first thing I did was I kind of hung out at a skate shop, and the shop was called Produce, and they were a really cool store that got in a lot of collab stuff, mostly SB stuff, skate related stuff. They did have dunks, but that kind of turned me onto the sneaker culture. And in Asia, especially Thailand, they've got a huge sneaker scene and they have huge sneaker stores. So obviously any sort of collab that comes through gets snatched up there in a second. So when I did see these, obviously being a toy collector and being told that there's an Ultraman collab and they're limited edition, that really kind of blew all the whistles in my head when it came to the shoe. And looking at the color waves, it's a huge thing. Also having a graffiti background and looking at colors working together, tattoos working together, seeing a shoe kind of be loyal to the real color scheme of Ultraman for me was just insane. Because the average Joe that doesn't know Ultraman, he's going to appreciate the shoe, but if you're a collector, you're really going to see that sort of taste and style that went into making the shoe. So yeah, if you find yourself in Cape Town and you want to come and chat about vintage toys, or come see the collection, or get tattooed, or just come and feel the space, please come down to Tomb Tattoo anytime.